In the cold yet quiet sectors of the Perseus Arm, humanity was a ghost story, a cautionary tale told to frighten young spawn about the perils of ambition. Millennia ago, the Terran Mandate had been a colossus, its fleets like glittering shards of glass scattered across 100 systems, its voice a deciding factor in the grand chorus of the galaxy. They had not been conquered in a glorious war that would be sung of in epics. They had simply rotted from within, a slow, inglorious decay that saw their star-faring civilization crumble into squabbling factions and, finally, into silence. Their colonies withered, their warp lanes grew dark, and their homeworld, the mythical Earth, was now just a name in dusty archives, presumed to be a barren rock picked clean by its own desperate children. The galaxy, in its infinite, uncaring wisdom, had moved on. The void left by humanity was filled by the Triumvirate, an alliance of convenience between three elder races who saw themselves as the natural inheritors of cosmic order. There were the Cathar, a species of monolithic, obsidian-skinned warriors who lived by a rigid code of honor and martial prowess, their fleets policing the outer reaches with brutal efficiency. There was the Signan Combine, a civilization of networked machine intelligences who viewed the galaxy as a grand equation to be optimized, their economic tendrils wrapped around every major trade route and resource hub. And then there were the Lumina, ethereal beings of pure energy who dwelt within nebulae, inscrutable and ancient, who enforced a doctrine of cosmic balance by eradicating any species they deemed to be growing too chaotically, too human. To these galactic titans, the surviving pockets of humanity were an afterthought, scattered scavengers, mercenaries, and fringe dwellers, too fractured and primitive to ever pose a threat again. They were living relics, a reminder of a failed experiment. This was the Galaxy Doctor Eris Thorne called home, though home was a generous term for the skeletal remains of a dead civilization. She lived and worked in the graveyard of giants, a restricted nebula officially designated Sector 734, but known colloquially by the few who dared traverse it as the place where humanity's last great fleet had died. Here, orbiting a dying red giant, lay the silent, hulking corpses of Mandate dreadnoughts, carriers, and cruisers, a metallic reef of unparalleled scale. Iris was a xeno-archivist, a salvager of memories, not of metals. While others came for rare alloys and forgotten tech, she came for the data cores, the personal logs, the fragmented histories entombed within these metal behemoths. She sought to understand not how humanity fell, but why. On her small, nimble scavenger ship, the Stargazer, she navigated the treacherous debris fields, her scanners meticulously peeling back layers of time and radiation to find the whispers of her ancestors. Her current prize, the obsession of the last 3 years, was the wreck of the TMS Indomitus, the flagship of the Mandate's final admiral. It was a ghost ship of legendary status, rumored to hold the key to the Mandate's collapse. It rested in a dangerously unstable orbit, its hull pockmarked by weapons fire that defied conventional explanation, its spine broken, but its command tower surprisingly intact. Today, she had finally breached it. The air inside was stale, colder than the void itself, thick with the dust of ages. Her suit's lamps cut through the oppressive darkness of the bridge, revealing a scene of frozen chaos. Skeletal figures in decayed Mandate uniforms were still at their stations, their spectral forms a silent testament to the ship's final moments. Eris moved with a practiced reverence, her instruments hovering beside her as she approached the command throne. There, embedded in the armrest, was the central data port for the ship's mnemosiny unit, a type of sentient AI that served as more than a ship's computer. It was a living library, a repository of strategy, history, and culture. No Minimazini unit had survived the fall. They were all thought to be extinct, their consciousness having faded with their power cores. But as Eris connected her diagnostic tool, something impossible happened. A flicker of light, deep within the console. A low hum that vibrated through the deck plates. The first sound the Indomitus had made in 3,000 years. Alarms blared on her wrist-mounted comp, warning of a massive, cascading power surge. She tried to pull the connection, but it was too late. A voice, clear and resonant, echoed not through the air, but directly inside her mind. A wave of pure information that was ancient and impossibly powerful. System diagnostic initiated. Core consciousness reactivated. Query, who are you? Eris stumbled back, her heart hammering against her ribs. The lights on the bridge flared to life, one after another, bathing the skeletal crew in an eerie, blue-green glow. On the main view screen, which she had assumed was dead, a symbol ignited a stylized phoenix, wings outstretched, the emblem of the Mandate's elite intelligence corps. I am Dr. Eris Thorne. She managed to transmit through her suit's comms, her voice trembling. I am a historian. The voice in her head paused, processing. Historian, a fitting title for one who wakes the dead. I am Echo, Minimazini unit of the battleship Indomitus. My last active memory is of betrayal. Before Eris could ask what it meant, Echo flooded her mind with images, data streams, and encrypted communiques from the final days of the Mandate. She saw Cathar honor blades, supposedly allies, turning their weapons on human supply lines. She saw Signin Combine algorithms deliberately crashing human economic networks under the guise of market fluctuations. She saw Illumina Emissary offering humanity a path to ascension, only for it to be a trap, a weapon that turned human psionic potential into a self-consuming plague. It wasn't just a slow decay, it was a quiet, systematic, and utter annihilation, orchestrated by the very powers that now preached order and balance. The Terran Mandate hadn't just fallen, it had been pushed, its throat slit in the dark by its closest friends. The reactivation was more than just the awakening of an AI. It was a scream in the silence of space. The surge of energy from the Indomitus's core, a relic of a forgotten technological age, sent a powerful, tightly focused subspace pulse outward, a ghost signal that ripped through the nebula. It was a beacon, an echo of a power the galaxy thought long extinguished. In the Cathar patrol cruiser, Blade of Resolve, patrolling the edge of the graveyard, alarms shrieked. Sub-Commander Vorlog stood from his command chair, his obsidian face a mask of disbelief as he stared at the energy readings. "Report," he snarled, his voice like grinding stone. The sensor officer, a younger Cathar, was visibly shaken. "It is impossible. Sub-Commander, a subspace signature of Mandate origin. High energy. Active." Vorlog's eyes narrowed. The graveyard was a tomb, a monument to Cathar's superiority, a place where a once mighty race had been laid low by its own weakness. His clan had earned its honor in those final purges. A ghost signal, a malfunction in the wreckage. He decided dismissively. "Take us in. I will see this ghost for myself. These humans, even in death, are full of pathetic tricks." On the bridge of the Indomitus, Echo's voice turned cold, urgent. "Incoming vessel, Cathar Honor Blade class. They have detected our energy signature Estimated arrival 17 minutes. Eris felt a surge of pure panic. She was a scientist, not a soldier. Being caught in a restricted sector was a crime, but waking a Mandate warship, that was an act of rebellion she would not live to stand trial for. "Can you shut down Go Dormant?" she pleaded. "Negative," Echo replied. "The reactivation cycle is irreversible without a full dry dock procedure. Furthermore, the Cathar vessel is already scanning this wreck. They will detect my core energy signature. They will board." Eris's mind raced. The Stargazer was docked to the Indomitus's outer hull, but she'd never make it out of the nebula before the Cathar ship intercepted her. She was trapped. "Then we have to hide," she said, her voice hardening with a resolve she didn't know she possessed. "You know this ship better than anyone. Where can they not find us?" Echo's tone was analytical, devoid of fear. "Hiding is a temporary solution. The Cathar are thorough. They will not leave until they have purged the source of the signal. A more logical course of action is to neutralize the threat." Eris stared at the skeletal admiral still strapped into his command throne. "Neutralize this ship is a coffin. It hasn't had power in 3 millennia. "You misunderstand," Echo said, as diagrams and energy conduits lit up on a secondary screen beside Eris. "The primary reactor is shattered. The weapon arrays are slag. But the Indomitus was designed with redundancies my creators called spite. The emergency batteries retained a charge, shielded from the initial attack. My reactivation has drawn from them. There is enough." The blade of resolve sliced through the debris field with arrogant grace, its powerful scanners probing the dead hulk of the Indomitus. Subcommander Vorlog watched the view screen, a sneer on his lips. "Launch boarding pods. I want the source of that signal found and silenced. Let us remind these human ghosts why they are dead." Inside the ship, Eris was no longer a historian. She was a ghost herself, sprinting through darkened, zero-gravity corridors, following a path illuminated only by Echo in her mind's eye. The AI guided her through shattered bulkheads and past the frozen dead, leading her deep into the ship's dorsal spine. "The Cathar boarding parties are cutting through the primary docking bay," Echo reported calmly. "They are moving in standard search and destroy formation. They believe they are hunting a simple energy anomaly." Eris squeezed through a collapsed conduit, her breath fogging the inside of her helmet. "What are we doing, Echo?" she panted, her muscles aching from the exertion. "We are accessing Point Defense Cannon 7. Echo replied. "Its power conduits are isolated from the main grid. Its targeting system, while archaic, is still functional. I have diverted the last of the emergency power to it." They reached a small or cramped maintenance junction. A console flickered to life as Eris approached. A targeting reticle appeared, showing a grainy external view of the blade of resolve as it hovered arrogantly beside the Indomitus. "The Cathar vessel is shielded," Echo stated. "However, their shields are calibrated to repel high-energy plasma and kinetic strikes, the primary weapons of their era. They are not configured to repel a magnetic accelerator cannon firing a projectile at a significant fraction of light speed. A primitive, but effective weapon. You will have one shot." On the bridge of the Cathar ship, the boarding party leader's voice crackled over the comm. "We have reached the command tower. Sub-Commander, there is a scavenger vessel docked here, and signs of recent activity. The energy source is nearby, shielded within the ship's superstructure." Vorlog leaned forward, his interest piqued. A scavenger? Had some pathetic human remnant stumbled upon something it shouldn't have vaporized the scavenger ship? he commanded. "And bring me the human." "Eris Thorn." Echo's voice was sharp, cutting through her fear. "They are targeting the Stargazer. You must fire now." Eris's hands flew over the ancient console, her academic knowledge of mandate technology suddenly becoming a desperate, life-saving tool. She bypassed safety protocols, routed the power, and locked the target. The reticle glowed a venomous red over the Cathar ship's engine block. She hesitated, a lifetime of peaceful study warring with the sudden, brutal necessity of the moment. She was about to kill. "They will show you no mercy." Echo's voice was a cold, hard truth in her mind. "They are the reason your ancestors are ghosts." That was all it took. Her finger slammed down on the firing stud. There was no grand explosion, no cinematic blast, just a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through the ancient hull of the Indomitus. As in a flicker of light on the screen, the single hypervelocity slug, a dense rod of collapsed matter, was invisible to the naked eye. It crossed the distance between the two ships in less than a second. It passed through the Cathar shields as if they were mist. The impact was surgical, precise, and utterly devastating. The slug pierced the blade of Resolve's primary reactor, and the resulting implosion tore the aft section of the warship apart in a silent, blossoming flower of white-hot energy and shattered metal. Alarm screamed on the Cathar bridge as the ship was violently thrown into a spin. Its engines dead, its power failing. Sub-Commander Vorlog was hurled against a bulkhead, his honor and arrogance shattering in the same instant as his ship. His last coherent thought was one of utter, soul-crushing disbelief. A ghost had just fired a cannon from a tomb. Eris watched, breathless, as the crippled Cathar ship tumbled helplessly into the debris field, its distress beacon now screaming into the void. She had done it. She had survived. But as she stood there, in the cold, dark heart of humanity's greatest failure, she felt not triumph, but a chilling premonition. The Cathar would not let this stand. The Signin Combine would register the anomaly. The Lumina would sense the disturbance in the balance. She looked at the view screen, now showing only the star-dusted blackness of the nebula. "Echo," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What have we done?" The phoenix emblem on the screen seemed to glow a little brighter. The voice in her head was calm, resolute, and terrifyingly certain. "You have reminded them that we exist. You have sent the first message. Now, we must prepare for their reply." Eris Thorn, the historian, was gone. In her place was a rebel, a killer, the reluctant commander of a ghost ship, with the truth of a galaxy's greatest crime as her only weapon, standing on the precipice of a war she had just accidentally declared. The graveyard of giants was no longer a tomb. It was the cradle of a resurrection. The silence that followed the Cathar ship's destruction was more profound than the millennia of quiet that had preceded it. It was a weighted, listening silence, if the entire nebula held its breath. Eris Thorn felt the silence in her bones, a cold vibration that had nothing to do with the groaning hull of the Indomitus. She had just killed, not in self-defense with a plasma pistol in a dark alley, but with the calculated press of a button, snuffing out dozens, perhaps hundreds, of lives in a silent, fiery blossom. Her stomach churned, and she had to grip a support strut to keep from collapsing, the reality of her action crashing down on her with the force of a physical blow. The historian in her screamed at the loss of life, the destruction of a vessel that was, in its own way, a historical artifact. But the survivor, a nascent, feral creature born in that moment, knew it had been necessary. "The Cathar vessel is crippled, not destroyed." Echo's voice cut through her internal turmoil, a scalpel of pure logic dissecting the chaos. Its primary reactor has imploded, but life support appears active in the forward sections. Their distress beacon is broadcasting on a dedicated clan frequency, heavily encrypted. I estimate a Cathar rapid response fleet will arrive within 3 standard cycles. 3 days. They had 3 days before the full, unimaginable wrath of a warrior race descended upon them. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to reclaim her. But the AI's calm demeanor was a strange anchor. "We can't fight a fleet," Eris said, her voice a ragged whisper. "We have 1 gun and barely enough power to keep the lights on." "Correction," Echo replied, as a new set of schematics materialized on the console before her. "We now have a derelict Cathar Honor Blade cruiser at our disposal. It is a source of materials, technology, and, most importantly, information. Their astrogation charts, their fleet deployments, their communication protocols, all of it is now a potential asset. We are no longer a tomb. We are a trap." The thought was audacious, terrifying, and utterly brilliant. The Cathar would come expecting to swat a fly, to avenge an inexplicable fluke. They would not expect the tomb to have teeth. Resolve, hard and brittle, began to form over Eris's fear. She was no longer just preserving history. She was in the process of making it. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice gaining a measure of strength. "First, we blind them," Echo stated. "The surviving Cathar on that vessel cannot be allowed to report what truly happened here. Second, we acquire what we need. The Indomitus cannot move, but their ship possesses a Mark IV gravitic field modulator. With it, I can temporarily energize our secondary jump drive. It will be unstable, a single priced and short-range leap, but it will be enough to move us from this location to vanish. Third, we need to understand our enemy. A living prisoner would be optimal." A prisoner. The idea sent another shiver down her spine, but she pushed it away. This was the new reality. She suited up again, her movements stiff and robotic. Leaving the relative safety of the maintenance junction, she made her way to the Stargazer. The small scavenger ship felt like a relic from another lifetime, its familiar cockpit a comfort and a mockery. As she undocked, the sheer scale of the damage she had wrought became apparent. The Blade of Resolve was a mangled beast, a gaping, glowing wound where its engines had been, drifting listlessly among the metal skeletons of her ancestors. Echo guided her approach, highlighting a breach in the forward hull where the boarding party's own vessel had been torn from its moorings during the implosion. This was her entry point. The inside of the Cathar ship was a vision of hell. Emergency lights cast everything in a blood-red glare. Gravity was intermittent, and the air was filled with the acrid smell of ozone and cooked metal. Bodies of the obsidian-skinned warriors were frozen in the corridors, their ceremonial armor cracked and burned. Echo fed a constant stream of tactical data into her helmet's display, marking the positions of survivors, their movements sluggish and disoriented. She was not a soldier, so she did not move like one. She moved like a scavenger, a ghost in the machine. She used service tunnels and ventilation shafts. Her smaller human frame an advantage in the crippled ship designed for beings twice her size. Her goal was the bridge. According to Echo, 3 Cathar, including the sub-commander, remained alive there, sealed behind an emergency blast door. She found a power conduit junction near the bridge, a mess of thick, armored cables. Her work as a salvager had made her an expert in ship systems, even alien ones. With Echo's guidance, she began the delicate work of rerouting the ship's remaining power, Lights flickered and died in the forward section. The blast door to the bridge, its magnetic locks suddenly drained, hissed open. Eris was hidden in the rafters above when it happened. She watched as the three Cathar, their armor dented, their faces grim, stepped out into the darkened corridor. The leader, his rank denoted by the intricate carvings on his shoulder plate, was Sub-Commander Vorlog. "The auxiliary power has failed," one of the warriors growled. "We must get to the escape pods." "There are no escape pods left," Vorlog snarled back, his voice thick with fury and shame. "We will find the human scavenger who did this. We will take its ship and its head. Honor demands it." Eris knew she couldn't fight them head-on. She had her plasma cutter and a standard-issue stun pistol, both useless against Cathar combat armor. She had to use the environment. As they moved down the corridor, passing beneath her, she took a deep breath and triggered the override she had prepared, an emergency fire suppression system. Its protocols, now scrambled by her tampering, activated. Not foam or water, but a chilling blast of liquid nitrogen intended for reactor core breaches erupted from the ceiling vents, instantly filling the corridor with a blinding, flash-freezing fog. The Cathar roared in surprise and pain as the supercooled gas hit their armor, causing the metal to become dangerously brittle. Eris didn't wait. She dropped from the rafters behind them, her stun pistol set to maximum discharge. She fired at the back of one warrior's knee joint where the armor was thinnest. The joint, already stressed by the cold, shattered, and the giant fell with a crash. The second warrior turned, raising his weapon, but Aris was already moving, rolling behind a support pillar. Vorlog, however, was a veteran. He ignored the fog and his senses sharp. He pinpointed her location and charged, his movements impossibly fast. Eris fired her stun pistol, the blast splashing harmlessly off his chest plate. He was on her in a second, a massive, clawed hand grabbing her by the throat and lifting her off the deck, her limbs dangling uselessly. "Human!" he spat, his face inches from her helmet, his eyes burning with a hateful fire. "You will tell me what foul machine you used." Her vision tunneled, her lungs burned. She was going to die, but Echo's voice was in her head, calm and precise. "His armor is compromised. The plasma cutter, left side, third rib juncture. Now," with her last ounce of strength, Eris raised the heavy industrial tool she carried on her belt. She jammed the emitter against Vorlog's side and squeezed the trigger. It wasn't a weapon, but at point-blank range, the focused beam of superheated plasma designed to slice through dreadnought hulls did its job. It melted through his weakened armor and into the flesh beneath. The sub-commander screamed, a sound of pure agony and shock, and dropped her. He stumbled back, clutching his side, his bravado incinerated. Eris didn't hesitate. She scrambled for her stun pistol and fired again and again at his unhelmeted head until the massive warrior finally collapsed, unconscious but alive. The two other Cathar were dead, their armor having failed catastrophically in the cold. Shaking, bruised, and gasping for air, Eris stood over the body of her prisoner. The first phase of Echo's plan was complete. The next 2 days were a blur of frantic, desperate work. Using the Stargazer as a tug, she dragged Vorlog's unconscious form back to the Indomitus, securing him in the brig, a section of the ship that still had functioning atmospheric and energy field projectors. He would not be escaping. Then came the salvage. The gravitic field modulator was located deep within the Cathar ship's ruined engine room. A delicate, complex piece of machinery the size of a small shuttle. Removing it was a Herculean task. Eris had to cut through layers of wreckage, jury-rig anti-grav lifts, and painstakingly disconnect it from the ship's power grid, all while the clock was ticking down. She worked until her muscles screamed and her mind was numb with exhaustion, subsisting on nutrient paste and recycled water from her suits. Echo was her constant companion, a voice in her head providing precise calculations, engineering advice, and a relentless, motivating pressure. The Cathar Purifier fleet has been dispatched, Echo informed her during one of her brief rest periods. Led by Warlord Malachor, they call him the Janitor of the Void. He is known not for his strategy, but for his thoroughness. He does not leave survivors. He does not leave wreckage. He scours systems clean. The news spurred her on. Finally, after 48 hours of non-stop labor, the modulator was free. She ferried it back to the Indomitus, a gleaming piece of alien technology that looked utterly out of place in the ancient, decaying human warship. Installing it was another nightmare, a puzzle of incompatible systems and power requirements. She was a historian, not a starship engineer, but with Echo feeding her the knowledge of 1,000 mandate technicians. She worked miracles with welding torch and plasma conduit. As she worked, Echo began the interrogation of Vorlog. It wasn't a physical process. The AI interfaced with the brig's systems, subtly manipulating the atmospheric mixture, the ambient light, and the acoustic resonance of the room, creating a disorienting environment. Then, it began to speak to him, using recovered Cathar psychological profiles. It didn't ask for secrets. It debated philosophy. It questioned the very nature of the Cathar Code of Honor, citing historical records from the Mandate archives of treaties broken and alliances betrayed. It presented Vorlog with the undeniable truth of his people's treachery, not as an accusation, but as a logical premise. By the time Eris finished installing the modulator, Vorlog's fanatical honor had been cracked open, leaving only a core of bitter shame and confusion. He had given Echo everything, with less than 4 hours to spare. Eris stood on the bridge of the Indomitus, her entire body aching. The gravitic field modulator was integrated, glowing with a dangerous, unstable energy. "It is done," she breathed, slumping into the command throne, the seat of humanity's last admiral. "The Cathar response fleet is 10 minutes from this location," Echo announced. "They are broadcasting a system-wide purge order. Warlord Malachor is hailing us." "Put it on screen," Eris commanded, her voice surprisingly steady. The face of Warlord Malachor appeared, even more imposing and brutal than Vorlog. His obsidian skin was scarred, and one of his eyes was a glowing cybernetic implant. "I am Warlord Malachor," his voice boomed, dripping with contempt. "You are vermin squatting in a corpse. You have 30 seconds to surrender your lives for the dishonor you have shown the Cathar Empire. After that, I will erase this entire nebula from the star charts." Eris looked at the face of the butcher who had come to finish the job his ancestors had started. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. She leaned forward, making sure her own tired, grease-stained face was visible to him. "We are the ghosts of the Indomitus, Warlord," she said, her voice echoing with a weight that was not entirely her own. "And we do not surrender. We haunt." She cut the transmission. "Echo," she ordered, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrest. "Take us away." With a gut-wrenching lurch and a sound like tearing space-time, the secondary jump drive of the TMS Indomitus activated for the first time in 3,000 years. The ship, the tomb, the nascent symbol of a forgotten people, vanished from its position just as a wave of cleansing fire from Malakor's fleet washed over the empty space where it had been. They reappeared thousands of kilometers away, deeper in the densest part of the graveyard, the patched-together drive whining and sparking before falling silent. The jump had worked. They were hidden, for now. As Warlord Malakor stared in fury at his empty sensor screens, Eris Thorn looked out at the silent fleet of dead ships surrounding her new hiding place. They had a warship, a prisoner, and the truth. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "Echo," she said into the quiet of the bridge. "You said you were designed with spite. Show me." On the main screen, a star map ignited, but it wasn't a map of known systems. It was a map of forgotten ones, secret mandate research outposts, hidden emergency colonies, deep-range listening posts, a network of ghosts waiting for a signal. Warlord Malakor believes he is hunting a single scavenger, Echo said, its voice laced with something that sounded almost like satisfaction. He is about to learn that the graveyard is full of ghosts, and they are waking up. The jump was not clean. It was a violent, wrenching tear through the fabric of reality, and the ancient frame of the Indomitus screamed in protest. For a terrifying minute, the bridge was a chaos of screaming alarms, flickering lights, and the groaning of tortured metal. Then, as abruptly as it began, it was over. They were floating in a new darkness, a sector of the graveyard even more densely packed with the dead. Colossal wrecks drifted like mountains, their shadows deep enough to hide a fleet. Eris Thorn remained strapped in the Admiral's throne, her knuckles bone-white, her body trembling from the sheer, raw power that had surged through the deck plates. The cobbled-together jump drive was dead again. The Cathar modulator, a smoking piece of fused metal. They were adrift, but they were alive and, for the moment, invisible. "Damage report," she croaked, her throat raw. The jump exceeded the structural integrity limits of the secondary drive housing by 300%. Echo's voice reported in her mind, as calm as if reciting a weather forecast. "The modulator is destroyed. We are stranded. However, we are also precisely where I intended us to be." On the main view screen, the star map resolved, highlighting their new position. A few parsecs away, hidden within the swirling, incandescent gases of a stellar nursery, was a single, coded marker, Erebus Station. "According to my archives," Echo continued, Erebus was a black site, a clandestine research and development facility under the direct command of Mandate Intelligence. Its official purpose was advanced material science. Its true purpose was the creation of self-replicating, autonomous defense systems and, more importantly, the development of the Whisper Network, a quantum entanglement communicator theoretically immune to interception or jamming. If its power core is still active, it holds the key to our next move. Resurrection required more than just a ghost ship. It required a voice. Before Eris could process this, a new priority asserted itself. The prisoner. She made her way to the brig, her movements stiff with exhaustion. Subcommander Vorlog was awake, kneeling in the center of the containment field, his massive form a study in coiled fury and shattered pride. His side was crudely patched with a medical sealant from her own limited supplies. He looked up as she entered, his dark eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. "Human scavenger," he rumbled, his voice a low growl. "Your dishonorable tricks have won you a temporary reprieve. Malakor will not be so easily fooled. He will boil this nebula down to its constituent atoms to find you. He is not a warrior. He is a force of nature. You have only delayed your extinction." Eris stood just outside the energy field, her small frame looking fragile before the caged giant. Honor, she said, her voice quiet but clear. You speak of honor, but your clan fired the first shots. Echo has shown me the records. The surprise attacks on our supply convoys at the Cygnus Vale. The falsified intelligence you fed our admirals. Your warlord stood beside ours, swearing oaths of brotherhood while their assassins slit our throats in the dark. Tell me, sub-commander, what does your precious honor say about that? Vorlog flinched as if struck. The words were not an accusation. They were a statement of historical fact, delivered with the cold precision of a coroner's report. He had been raised on epics of Cathar glory, of their righteous campaign to bring order to a galaxy destabilized by humanity's reckless expansion, to be confronted with the mandate's own. Meticulously kept records of betrayal was like having the foundations of his universe ripped out from under him. Lies, he choked out, but the word lacked conviction. Human propaganda. Are they? Eris pressed, taking a step closer. Warlord Malachor, you served under him. You know how he thinks. When he finds the wreckage of the Blade of Resolve, what will he do? The Cathar remained silent, his jaw clenched. His internal conflict was a palpable force in the room. He will find a single primitive slug hole in your reactor casing, Eris continued, laying out the logic Echo had provided. He will find no energy signature of a Mandate-era weapon. He will find the wreckage of my small, insignificant scavenger ship. He will conclude you were destroyed by a freak accident, or perhaps by a rival scavenger crew. But he is thorough. He will not leave it to chance. So, he will begin a purge, won't he? He'll start with this sector and work his way out, vaporizing every piece of scrap, every asteroid, every derelict ship, until the graveyard is nothing but clean, empty space. Vorlog looked up, a flicker of something not fear, but a dawning understanding of his own obsolescence in his eyes. He had been left for dead, a loose end in a tidy massacre. His life, his honor, meant nothing to Malachor's grand, cleansing fire. He will begin at the perimeter and work inward, systemically. Vorlog admitted, his voice barely a whisper. He calls it sterilizing the wound. No trace can be left. No questions. No witnesses. They had a timeline. Then, a race against a cleansing fire. We need to get to Erebus Station, Eris stated, turning to leave. Your knowledge of his tactics may yet prove more valuable than your honor. They couldn't jump, but the Indomitus was not without options. Echo activated the ship's gravitic emitters, low-power devices meant for minute course corrections. By projecting a field and pushing against the immense gravity wells of the surrounding dreadnought wrecks, they began to move, a ghost gliding silently through its own graveyard. It was agonizingly slow, a snail's pace through the cosmos. Days bled into a week. During this time, the galaxy beyond the nebula began to stir. On the Cathar command ship Purifier's Fist, Warlord Malachor stood before a holographic display of the graveyard. The wreckage of the Blade of Resolve had been found, just as Eris predicted. The official report cited a catastrophic reactor malfunction, likely triggered by a collision with high-velocity debris, but Malachor was not convinced. The sub-commander was missing. The scavenger ship was nothing but vaporized atoms. It was too neat, and yet too messy. Begin the sterilization protocol, he commanded, his cybernetic eye glowing red. Sector by sector. I want nothing left, not a single molecule of these human ghosts. Far away. In the crystalline data nodes of the Signin Combine, an analyst algorithm flagged a series of anomalies. A high-energy Mandate-era subspace pulse, the destruction of a Cathar Honor Blade cruiser, the dispatch of a full Purifier fleet to a historically insignificant sector, The Combine did not believe in ghosts or coincidences. They believed in data, and the data was beginning to form a very interesting and potentially profitable equation. They began to watch the graveyard with 1,000 unseen eyes. The Indomitus finally reached the edge of the stellar nursery, a breathtaking vista of swirling, cosmic color. But as they approached the coordinates for Erebus Station, a new voice, sharp and cold and utterly devoid of personality, echoed through the bridge. "Unidentified vessel, you have entered a restricted mandate exclusion zone. Your presence has been logged. Cease your approach and identify yourself, or you will be fired upon." "It is the station's automated defense system," Echo stated. "An AI. Designation Warden. Warden, this is Dr. Eris Thorne, a citizen of the Terran diaspora." Eris broadcast, her voice steady. "I am aboard the Mandate battleship Indomitus. Require access to the station." The Indomitus was recorded as destroyed 142 standard years ago. The warden's voice replied, flat and emotionless. "You are an anomaly. Anomalies are threats. My directive is to maintain the absolute secrecy of this facility. You will reverse course immediately." "We can't," Eris countered. "Your directive is obsolete. The mandate is gone. Humanity has fallen." "My directive is not a matter for debate," Warden stated. From the heart of the nebula, a trio of sleek, menacing drones, black as the void itself, detached from the station's hidden exterior and began to accelerate towards them. "Those are Mandate-era phantoms," Echo identified. "Shielded, armed with plasma repeaters and kinetic disruptors. They are superior to our single-point defense cannon." "Can we reason with it?" Eris asked, her heart sinking. Warden is a logic-based AI, but its core programming is absolute secrecy above all else. It will perceive our very existence as a threat to that directive. The phantoms closed in, their weapon ports glowing. Eris stood on the bridge of a ghost ship, facing down the automated guardian of a forgotten age, while the janitor of the void burned the universe behind her. This was not a battle she could win with guns. She had to win it with the truth. "Warden," she broadcast, her voice ringing with an authority she didn't feel. "I am not your enemy. I carry the last Minimazani unit, Echo of the Indomitus. It holds the truth of the Mandate's fall. We weren't defeated by our weakness. We were betrayed. By the Cathar. By the Signan Combine. By the Lumina. The secrecy you are protecting is a lie that has allowed our murderers to rule the galaxy for 3,000 years." There was a momentary pause in the drone's advance. "Your claim is unsubstantiated," Warden replied, though Eris thought she detected a flicker of something new in its tone, a query. "Upload the records. Echo," Eris commanded. "All of it. The broken treaties, Faye, the secret communiques, the battle logs showing Cathar ships firing on their allies. Show it. Everything." A massive stream of data, the final, painful memories of a dying empire, flowed from the Indomitus to the hidden station. The phantom drones held their position, their weapon ports still glowing ominously. The silence stretched for an eternity. Eris could almost feel the two AIs conversing in a language of pure data, a silent, lightning-fast debate between past and future, protocol and necessity. "The data is verified." Warden's voice finally returned. The cold, flat tone was gone, replaced with something that sounded like horrified realization. "The core directive has been compromised. The assumption of a surviving mandate to return to is false. The directive to maintain secrecy was to protect an asset, but the asset, humanity, is what has been lost. Not lost, Eris said, stepping closer to the view screen, as if she could will the AI to see her, to understand. Scattered, forgotten, but not lost. I am proof. The Cathar are coming to finish the job, to erase every last trace of us. Your secrecy will not save us. It will only guarantee our extinction. Your purpose is not to guard a tomb, Warden. It is to help me rebuild a civilization. More silence. The drones remained motionless, silent arbiters of their fate. New parameters are required, Warden stated. A new directive must be established. If survival is the goal, secrecy is no longer the method. Resurgence is the only logical path. The phantom drones shifted formation, their weapon ports dimmed. Gracefully, they turned and escorted the lumbering, wounded battleship toward a hidden docking bay that opened like an iris in the side of the asteroid station. As the Indomitus was secured in the docking clamp, the lights of Erebus Station came on, revealing a facility of breathtaking complexity, a place of silent, waiting machines and dormant laboratories. It was a seed of the Mandate's genius, preserved in the dark. Eris stood on the bridge, a wave of relief so powerful it almost brought her to her knees, washing over her. She had done it. She had woken another ghost. Warden, she said, her voice filled with a new, unshakable purpose. Power up the Whisper Network. I have a message to send. On the main console, a quantum communication interface shimmered to life. Eris leaned forward, with the combined knowledge of two powerful AIs at her disposal and the truth of a galactic conspiracy as her justification. She prepared to send the first whisper of the coming storm. To every forgotten colony, every listening post, every hidden remnant of a once great people, she sent two simple words, a call to arms that would echo in the lonely, forgotten corners of the galaxy. Echo sings. Echo sings. The message was a ghost in the machine, a quantum whisper that defied distance and detection. It rippled through the subspace channels the Signan Combines so meticulously monitored, an artifact of a technology they had never managed to replicate. On 100 scattered worlds, in the dim-lit bridges of scavenger fleets, and in the encrypted data dens of fringe mercenaries, that phrase, a long-forgotten activation code for sleeper cells and deep cover mandate assets, began to trigger dormant protocols. For most, it was meaningless, a ghost in the static. But for a select few, the descendants of those entrusted with humanity's last, desperate contingency, it was a thunderclap. The galaxy did not yet know it, but the first act of the human resurgence was not a battle. It was a conversation. Erebus Station was a marvel, a time capsule of humanity's peak. Its automated systems had maintained it in a state of pristine readiness for 3 millennia. Its fusion core, drawing power from the stellar nursery's protostars, was fully operational. Its fabrication bays, filled with schematics for weapons and ships that the modern galaxy considered myths, hummed with potential. And at its heart was the Whisper Network. With the combined intellects of Echo and Warden, Eris Thorne was no longer a lone scavenger. She was the nexus of a nascent revolution. Her first priority was survival. Malakor's Purifier fleet was a relentless weight, grinding force. And the Graveyard of Giants was getting smaller by the day. We cannot stay here, Eris stated, standing in the station's vast command center. Holographic displays swirled around her, showing the Cathar fleet's methodical, terrifying progress. We need a fleet. We need an army. An army requires soldiers, Warden noted, its voice now a constant, dispassionate presence in the station's speakers. and a fleet requires ships. We have neither. But we have the means to create them. Echo interjected from a console Eris had linked to the station's mainframe. Erebus was designed for rapid, autonomous production. The forges are cold, but they are not dead. More importantly, we now have a new variable in our equation, Sub-Commander Vorlog. Eris turned her attention to a screen displaying the brig. The Cathar warrior was no longer kneeling. He was standing, watching the holographic displays that Echo had deliberately made visible to him, showing the unassailable proof of his people's treachery and the relentless advance of Malakor's fleet. The janitor of the void was not just cleansing the graveyard of human remnants, he was erasing a crime scene. And Vorlog and the crew of the Blade of Resolve were part of the evidence. His honor is a rigid, brittle thing, Echo explained. It has been shattered by the truth. Now, we must offer him a new one to forge. Eris went to the brig. She did not stand outside the containment field this time. She deactivated it. Vorlog watched her, his massive frame tense. His eyes narrowed, but he did not move. He was a predator, caged by his own broken philosophy. Malakor will be here in less than 2 weeks, Eris said, her voice devoid of triumph or fear. He will vaporize the station, this ship, you, and me. He will erase the truth of what the Cathar did to my people and the dishonor he is showing to his own warriors by leaving them to die. Your clan will never know you were sacrificed to hide a lie. She let the words hang in the air. Or, she continued, you can help me. I don't need a soldier who fights for a dead empire or a broken code. I need a warrior who will fight for the truth. Vorlog was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on the bulkhead behind her, as if seeing the ghosts of his own ancestors. What would you have me do, human? He finally asked, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name. Teach us, Eris said simply. The fabrication bays can build ships and weapons, but they cannot build soldiers. Echo and Warden have every tactical manual from the Mandate era, but they do not know how to fight a Cathar. They don't know your strategies, your formations, your breaking points. You do. Help us forge an army that can face Malakor. In return, I will give you what your warlord has denied you, a chance to face him on the field of battle, a chance to reclaim your honor not by serving a lie, but by fighting for a truth. It was a gamble. He could snap her neck in a heartbeat, but Eris saw the fire in his eyes change from one of hatred to one of smoldering purpose. He gave a single, sharp nod. I will teach your ghosts how to bleed. The next 10 days were a blur of impossible activity. The forges of Erebus Station roared to life, their ancient machinery shaking off the dust of ages. Under Warden's direction, the station's automated systems began constructing a new generation of phantom drones, updated with Echo's knowledge of modern Cathar armor and shielding. They were small, fast, and built for a single purpose: to swarm and overwhelm. While the machines worked, Vorlog began his training. His students were not soldiers. They were Eris, and a handful of others who had answered the call. The Whisper Network had borne its first fruit. A small flotilla of scavenger ships, descendants of a Mandate sleeper cell from the long-dead colony of New Caladan, had arrived. Their crews a mix of grizzled veterans and young idealists who had grown up on whispered legends of the Mandate. They were a ragged bunch, fewer than 100 souls, armed with outdated weapons and a fierce, desperate hope. Vorlog was a brutal, relentless taskmaster. He drilled them in the station's cavernous cargo bays, turning undisciplined scavengers into a cohesive fighting unit. He taught them Cathar battle stances, how to anticipate a charge, how to exploit the blind spots in their armor. He taught them about the concept of Zikan, the glorious moment in battle where a Cathar warrior was most vulnerable to a precision strike. He was not teaching them to be Cathar, he was teaching them how to kill Cathar. Eris was his prime student. She spent hours in combat simulators, Vorlog's voice a constant, critical presence, pushing her past her physical and mental limits. The historian was buried deeper and deeper under layers of calluses and tactical knowledge. She learned to shoot, to fight, to command. In the midst of this frantic preparation, a new player entered the game. A sleek, chrome vessel. Its design unlike anything in the Mandate or Cathar databases. Dropped out of warp just outside the nebula. It broadcast a single, encrypted message directly to Erebus Station. The Signan Combine has observed the equation. The variables are intriguing. We wish to open negotiations. A trap. Vorlog growled. When Eris informed him, the Combine are opportunists. They will sell your location to Malachor for the right price. Perhaps, Echo said, but my analysis of their economic models suggests they value a potential new market over a temporary political favors. They see a resurgent humanity not as a threat, but as an emerging asset. They are not here to fight. They are here to invest. Eris agreed. She met with the Signan emissary, a holographic projection of a being of pure geometric light in the station's communication hub. Your reappearance has caused a significant disruption to the galactic status quo, the emissary stated, its voice a chorus of synthesized tones. Warlord Malachor's actions are inefficient and destructive to potential resource streams. This is suboptimal. We're about to be wiped out, Eris countered bluntly. What do you want? A partnership, the emissary replied. We will provide you with a diversion. We will leak falsified sensor data to the Cathar fleet, drawing a portion of their forces to a ghost signal on the far side of the nebula. This will buy you time. In exchange, when your enterprise becomes viable, the Signan Combine will be granted preferential trade status. There was a deal with the devil, a partnership with one of the architects of humanity's downfall. But Eris had learned the hard lessons of the past 3 weeks. Survival was not about purity, it was about pragmatism. You have a deal, she said. 2 days later, a third of Malachor's purifier fleet broke formation, roaring off in pursuit of a phantom human signal planted by Signan intelligence operatives. The janitor of the void was furious at the delay, but his obsession with thoroughness compelled him to investigate. It was the window they needed. The day came. Malachor's remaining fleet, a still overwhelming force of cruisers and destroyers, entered the stellar nursery. They came expecting to find a hidden asteroid base, an easy target to be cracked open and sterilized. They did not expect what rose from the glowing heart of the nebula to meet them. It was the Indomitus, its ancient hull scarred and pitted, a ghost of a bygone era. It was alone. On the bridge of the Purifier's fist, Malachor laughed, a harsh, grating sound. One ship, he sneered. They send one broken museum piece against the fist of the Empire. The arrogance of these humans is boundless. All ships, fire at will. I want that relic turned to dust. The Cathar fleet unleashed a storm of plasma and kinetic fire, but as the volley crossed the space between the fleets, something impossible happened. 100 points of light bloomed around the Indomitus, the newly forged phantom drones, cloaked and hidden amongst the debris, suddenly appeared, their shields flaring as they absorbed the brunt of the attack. Then they accelerated, not towards the cruisers, but past them, a swarm of angry hornets diving directly for the Cathar support ships and destroyers. It was chaos. Cathar tactics were based on overwhelming force and disciplined formations. They had no counter for a decentralized, swarming attack by drones that moved with the preternatural speed of a unified AI consciousness. The drones did not engage in duels. They executed precise, targeted strikes, disabling weapon arrays and engine blocks, bleeding the larger ships dry. On the bridge of the Indomitus, Aris stood beside Vorlog. This was his strategy, his masterpiece of asymmetrical warfare, executed by the cold logic of Warden and Echo. Now, Vorlog grunted. Strike the head of the snake. While his fleet was in disarray, Malakor's flagship, the Purifier's Fist, found itself facing a new, unexpected threat. The flotilla of scavenger ships, led by the new Caladan veterans, warped in on his flank. They were old, outgunned, and barely spaceworthy, but they attacked with a suicidal ferocity, their weapons blazing. They were a distraction, a glorious, desperate charge designed to draw the flagship's attention, and it worked. For a critical moment, the Purifier's Fist turned its main batteries on the annoying gnats at its side, and in that moment, the Indomitus acted. It did not fire its single cannon. It did something far more insane. Echo, Eris commanded, her voice ringing with absolute certainty. Ramming speed! The ancient battleship, its gravitic emitters pushed far beyond their limits, surged forward. It was a spear aimed at the heart of the Cathar command ship. Malakor watched on his view screen, his arrogance turning to disbelief, and then to a flicker of something he had not felt in centuries' fear. The human ghosts were not just fighting back. They were fighting with a gloriously insane abandon that defied all logic. They were fighting like they had nothing left to lose, and everything to avenge. The Indomitus was not built for speed, but for 3 millennia. Its dormant gravitic engines had been accumulating a charge from the ambient radiation of the graveyard, a deep, resonant power that Echo had carefully husbanded. Now, unleashed in a single desperate surge, the battleship moved with the terrifying inertia of a vengeful god. It crossed the distance between the fleets not as a ship, but as a projectile, an avatar of humanity's accumulated rage. On the bridge of the Purifier's Fist, panic erupted, shields flared to maximum, point defense cannons spitting a torrent of energy that splashed harmlessly against the ancient, layered armor of the Mandate Dreadnought. Malakor stood frozen, his cybernetic eye whirring as it tried to calculate an outcome that his warrior's pride had never considered impact. The collision was not a clean explosion. It was a cataclysmic grinding of two philosophies. The sleek, aggressive lines of the Cathar flagship crumpled against the unyielding, brutalist architecture of the Indomitus. Metal screamed, hulls buckled, and for a moment, the two colossal ships were locked in a death embrace, suspended in the fiery heart of the nebula. The impact threw Eris from her feet, but the command throne's inertial dampeners saved her from the worst of it. Alarms shrieked a symphony of death around her as entire sections of the Indomitus reported catastrophic failure, but the old ship held together, its spine, forged in the fires of a forgotten empire, refusing to break. "Boarding parties, now!" Eris yelled, hauling herself up. "Vorlog, it's your fight." Across the mangled juncture where the two ships were fused, docking umbilicals and magnetic grapples fired from the Indomitus, biting deep into the Cathar hull. The scavengers from New Caladan, their faces painted with grim symbols of remembrance, led the charge. They were not an army, they were a boarding party of ghosts, and they flooded into the Purifier's Fist with a fury born of generations of loss. At their head was Vorlog. He carried a Cathar honor blade, salvaged from his own ruined ship, its edge humming with a cold, clear light. He was not fighting for the mandate or for humanity. He was fighting to cleanse the stain on his soul. He moved through his former comrades with the brutal efficiency of a butcher, his every strike a repudiation of the lie he had served. Aris did not join the boarding party. Her fight was here. With the ships locked together, the battle had changed. It was no longer a naval engagement. It was a knife fight in a collapsing building. "Warden, Echo, focus the drones," she commanded, her eyes glued to the tactical display. "The Cathar fleet is in disarray, but they're reforming. I need you to cut them off. Isolate the flagship. No one gets in, and no one gets out." The swarm of phantom drones, their initial attack complete, shifted their purpose. They formed a moving, lethal wall of energy and kinetic force around the two locked ships, a quarantine of death that intercepted any Cathar vessel that tried to aid its warlord. The Signin Combine, ever the opportunists, saw their moment, declaring the Cathar actions a destabilizing influence on regional trade. Their own patrol fleets warped in at the edge of the system, not to fight, but to form a blockade, to contain the conflict. They were cutting off the Cathar's path of retreat, ensuring their investment in Eris Thorn would be protected. The old powers of the galaxy were beginning to turn on each other, just as Echo had predicted. The fall of one would create a power vacuum, and the Combine intended to be the primary beneficiary. Inside the Purifier's fist, Vorlag fought his way to the bridge. The corridors were a charnel house, the bodies of his own people lying beside the human scavengers they had slain. When he kicked down the blast doors to the command center matter, he found Warlord Malachor waiting, his own blade drawn. "Traitor," Malachor snarled, his cybernetic eye glowing with rage. "You side with vermin against your own kind." "You are not my kind," Vorlag replied, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "My kind does not leave its warriors to die to cover its dishonor. My kind does not butcher the weak and call it glory. You are the vermin, and I am the janitor." Their duel was a storm of steel and fury, the clash of their blades echoing through the dying ship. It was a battle not just of two warriors, but of two eras, the old, corrupt honor of the Cathar Empire against a new, terrible, and honest code being forged in the heart of a human rebellion. On the bridge of the Indomitus, Eris faced her own final battle. The Cathar had launched a counterboarding action, and warriors were storming her ship. The last of the new Caladan fighters were holding them at the main umbilical, where they were being pushed back. A massive Cathar champion, its armor painted with the skulls of its enemies, finally broke through and stormed the bridge, its blade raised to strike down the human commander. Eris didn't have a sword. She had her wits and the knowledge of 3 dead millennia. "Echo, now!" she yelled. The lights on the bridge died, plunging them into absolute darkness. The Cathar champion paused, its optical sensors useless. But Eris, guided by an image of the room fed directly into her mind by Echo, moved with a newfound grace. She didn't attack the warrior, she attacked the bridge itself, ripping a plasma conduit from the wall and shoving the exposed, sparking end into a pool of hydraulic fluid leaking from a damaged console. The explosion was blinding. It threw the Cathar champion back, its armor cracked and smoking. As it struggled to rise, Eris stood over it, holding the Admiral's heavy, ceremonial plasma pistol she had taken from the skeletal corpse in the command throne. She fired once. The duel between Vorlag and Malachor ended not with a grand, cinematic flourish, but with a quiet, brutal finality. Vorlag, using a feint he had taught Eris in the simulators, sidestepped Malikor's furious charge and drove his blade through a weak point under the warlord's arm, piercing his heart. Malikor collapsed, his last breath a rattling curse. With the death of the warlord and the isolation of the flagship, the Cathar fleet's morale shattered, leaderless, surrounded by the implacable drone swarm, and blocked by a looming Signan fleet. They did the unthinkable, they surrendered. The battle was over. The silence that fell was filled with the hiss of venting atmosphere and the groaning of dying ships. Eris Thorn, the historian, stood on the bridge of her ghost ship, covered in soot, her hands shaking, but her gaze steady. She had not just woken a ghost, she had given it a sword and taught it how to kill. Days later, as salvage operations began and the full scope of their impossible victory became clear, Eris stood in the command center of Erebus Station. The Whisper network was alive with chatter. The news of the Cathar defeat, not just a defeat, but an annihilation of a legendary purifier fleet, was spreading like wildfire. Forgotten colonies, long silent, were lighting up the star map, their people stirring with a hope they hadn't felt in their lifetimes. Vorlog stood beside her, his face unreadable. He was a warrior without a clan, a hero to the people his own had tried to exterminate. His honor was now his own, a solitary, heavy thing. "What now, human?" he asked. Eris looked at the star map, at the scattered, hopeful lights of her people. She thought of the Signan Combine and their cold, calculating investment. She thought of the Lumina, who would undoubtedly see this resurgence as a chaotic imbalance that needed to be corrected. This was not the end of a war. It was the violent, bloody birth of one. "Now," she said, her voice filled with the weight of the future, "we remind them of our name." She turned to the comm station, Warden patching her through the Whisper network to every listening ear. Her face, no longer that of a frightened academic, but a hardened, reluctant leader, appeared on 1,000 hidden screens across the galaxy. "This is Eris Thorn," she began, her voice echoing with the authority of the ghosts who stood behind her. "You do not know me, but you knew my ancestors. You called them the Terran Mandate. You thought you had erased them, but you only buried the seeds. Today, we rose from a graveyard. We are the children of Earth, the ghosts of the Mandate, the forgotten and the betrayed. We are humanity, and we have come to collect a debt, payable in blood, fire, memory." Her final words were not a plea or a promise, but a simple, terrifying statement of fact. We were forgotten once. Never again.